Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our 2022 SEC Championship prediction. Minus 16 is the spread in favor of the Bulldogs. 50.5 is the over/under. CBS at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, live from Mercedes-Benz Stadium. LSU leads the all-time series 18-13-1, winning the last two. Kirby Smart has never beat LSU in his two tries. Looking at this LSU offense, pretty interesting unit, Nick. They're putting up a good margin, I would say, with what they have to work with. 32.5 points per game. This is a very struggle-fest offensive line. You're looking at two true freshman tackles. The interior's been very inconsistent. It was kind of a plug-and-play type of offensive line coming into the year, and it's certainly been a weak spot for them. Jaden Daniels now, though, I think he's had a pretty phenomenal season. 2,500 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, only 2 picks. Early on in the year, they were just really not aggressive at all throwing the football. They were very conservative. They started to open it up a good bit since that Tennessee loss, and I think it's done them wonders. 349 against Florida, Alabama. They were able to make some good plays through the air. You won't see it from a yardage total standpoint, but I think the threat has certainly been clear and obvious. 824 yards and 11 touchdowns for Daniels. His legs has really carried this offense for most of the season. They have a very talented wide receiving group. Malik Neighbors, Keyshawn Boutte, Uriah Jenkins, Brian Thomas, Mason Taylor at tight end's phenomenal as well. This is one of the nation's deepest wide receiving cores, which means you figured LSU would probably be and have a more dangerous passing attack. I certainly think that, again, that threat is still there. Jaden Daniels, though, he's a little banged up after that Texas A&M game. I believe he is in a walking boot, and obviously that's going to be massive in this game because his legs, he's terrific when it comes to running the football, and if that element is not there for their offense, it's really going to be tough to get anything going against this elite defense.
Jaden Daniels' mobility on Saturday is certainly a big question mark for this LSU offense. Been phenomenal on the ground so far this year. You kind of expected that coming out of Arizona State. You would hope that when he transitioned to this LSU offense, he'd be able to pick up a lot of ground game. 824 yards on the ground, 11 touchdowns on 174 attempts, so good for 4.7 yards per carry. He really is a true dual threat quarterback in the SEC. Fantastic throwing the ball as well. 68.6% completion percentage, the 15 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. His wide receiving core, fantastic. Neighbors has really kind of stepped up. We thought Boutte would be the one that kind of led the way for this team. Certainly had a few drops early on, but he's kind of rounded out his season, improving as every week goes on. He's got 42 catches for 431 yards plus a score. Neighbors leading the way, 726 yards receiving plus the touchdown. Uriah Jenkins has 5 scores on the year, 13.8 yards per catch for him, leads the team in average there. This offense is good, right? We didn't know what to expect coming into the season. We thought this offense might not be as high-flying as they are. 32.5 points per game is an impressive number. If Daniels can be fully healthy and be fully mobile on Saturday, I think this offense has a certain opportunity to put up a lot of points. But considering that injury, it just leaves a lot of question marks for me.
They weren't exactly great against Texas A&M. Arkansas is under 300 yards, under 400 against Bama and in the A&M game, under 360 against Tennessee. And this offense has been good, but for the most part, I think a lot of these numbers are skewed. They only had 270 as well against Auburn. This is an offense that's been very inconsistent. One thing to look for is probably the slot fade. I think that's one route and one play they can call to try to get some mismatches that are favorable for them with these skilled receivers, and they can win in some one-on-one coverage. They're going to have to take advantage of that big time. Again, though, this is an offense that 48% conversion on third down this year, and that's really been their bread and butter is Daniels' legs on third down. You look at their backfield's pretty beat up. Josh Williams, not fully healthy. Armani Goodwin's been out for a long time. John Emery, he's back. 5 touchdowns for him, 300-plus yards. Noah Kane, it's probably going to be his backfield as well, 340 and 7 touchdowns. 4.9 yards per carry for this football team, 192 yards per game on the ground. The running game is really good, but I do think this is a bit of a mismatch for this offense.
I agree. I like this running game a lot. I think they have good variety with the way that they have Daniels available as well as Williams and Kane. These guys are solid backs. Certainly the production at Kane, 340 yards on the ground, 5.3 yards per carry, plus the 7 scores for him. I do agree there is potentially a mismatch here against this Georgia defense, but this running game, it's been good. I think that the balance is very key with this LSU offense. They're able to throw the ball, they're able to run the ball, and given the weapon that Daniels is, they have a serious balance in the backfield. He can carry it or he can hand the ball off. I love the absolute balance this team has. That's something we stress on the offense is got to have that strong balance. I think this running back core is solid. I like the group here. Kane, I like him a lot. Emery Jr. as well is not a terrible back. So I certainly like the balance here.
Looking at the Georgia offense, this is a unit that's really been flat in a lot of first halves this year. They weren't great against Georgia Tech. Kentucky, they only put up 16 points in that game. The rushing attack really carried them in that one. Mississippi State, they had some struggles. They weren't exactly great against Tennessee either. Remember all the way back against Auburn, they only had about 30 passing yards or less than that in that first half. Stetson Bennett overall has had a pretty sound season. 16 touchdowns, 6 picks, 7 rushing touchdowns, 3,100 yards through the air. This team really seems to convert on third down a lot. They seem to be in a lot in third and shorts, a lot of third mediums. That's one thing Stetson Bennett does a great job of, is converting. 51.3% conversion rate. That's among one of the nation's best. You look at the bread and butter of this offense, though. It's Kenny McIntosh, Dejon Edwards, Kendall Milton, a by-committee backfield, 600-plus yards for Edwards and McIntosh, who's also emerged as one of their top pass catchers with 35 receptions for 437 yards. Very fresh backfield, Nick. McIntosh just now broke 10 attempts per game. These guys, they dish it around to everybody, and I expect that to continue. That's a big reason why this running game is so good. 203 yards per game, very effective. 5.5 yards per attempt. That's where they're going to want to win here. They're facing an LSU defense that, coming off a slaughter fest against Devon A. Chain and Texas A&M, an offensive line that's really struggled this year. Now they're playing a Georgia one that's been pretty terrific, especially when it comes to physicality. This running game is going to be dynamic. You look at Brock Bowers, 46 receptions, 645, 5 touchdowns. You'll get him on a jet sweep occasionally, and he'll usually house that for 70-plus yards. Lat McContney, 46 receptions as well, 600-plus yards. He makes an occasional mistake, but I've seen less of that the last couple of weeks. I believe he had a big punt return against Mississippi State as well a couple weeks ago. Darnell Washington, they've started to get him involved a good bit this year. Great size at tight ends. So, these guys they're really nasty in the trenches when it comes to blocking with all that size and physicality. For the most part, they don't have a lot of guys that win on the outside. It's kind of by committee for your X and Y wide receivers. Karis Jackson, Dominic Blaylock, even Dylan Bell, a freshman, gets involved. Arian Smith, he's back to being healthy enough to get on the field. I don't know what kind of role he'll have in this one. His speed's obviously great for them. What are your thoughts on this Georgia offense, Nick? Because obviously they love to run the ball. They got plenty of guys that can do it. Despite not having a lot of great talent at wide receiver, really no talent at all, I would say, they get the job done through the air when they have to. I expect that to continue here against LSU, as I think the balance will be too good for the Bulldogs.
There's a significant amount of variety with this Georgia offense. Certainly great in the variety and carrying the ball. McIntosh, Edwards, and Milton, they all have 6, 7, 8 touchdowns total. McIntosh has 8, Edwards has 7, Milton has 6. They each have above 400 yards rushing on the season. Edwards and McIntosh have really kind of split the load up top. 654 yards for McIntosh, 604 for Edwards, 5.3 yards per carry for both of them. I love the balance here, right? It's perfect. They really have a great sort of variety. They even, hand the ball off to McConkey sometimes. Brock Bowers gets the ball occasionally on a handoff. So they really have so many different options, which is why they don't really need to rely on their passing game, because they have so many options of variety in the running game that kind of bails out what could be considered a weak passing game, just because the talent isn't really there. Obviously, Brock Bowers is a freak athlete, great blocker as well, but just the way he moves for his size is ridiculous. He's having a hell of a season as we expected. 645 yards receiving, the 5 scores for him. Lat McConkey leading the way. Good wide receiver. I like his 46 catches so far this season. 13.2 yards per grab, 4 scores for him. A couple other guys I'm looking at. Dylan Bell. He's stepping up despite his youth. 2 scores for him and the 166 yards on the season. The wide receiving core, it certainly isn't deep, and they don't really have an outside threat, but I don't think it really matters for this team considering their ability to run the ball and how they can kind of balance and use that variety to carry the ball when they need to. This offense is great on the ground for sure. Don't make a whole lot of mistakes, and they certainly can put up a ton of points on Saturday.
And the offensive line's been terrific, of course, top to bottom, but, mainly Broderick Jones, his ability as a pass blocker, he's been terrific. They haven't actually been as great, I think, when it comes up front, when it comes to run blocking, but for the most part, this is a really good offensive line. They don't give up too much sacks, physical up front. They get a good push. So Georgia offense, pretty sound from top to bottom. Look at the LSU defense, 21.5 points per game allowed. This is a defense coming into the year loaded with absolute talent. They've had their fair share of struggles. Like, they just came off a very poor effort against Texas A&M. They weren't exactly great against Alabama. They were very good against Arkansas, Tennessee. Balance reigned supreme on that one. Florida, I think, was having a really good day on the ground as well. So LSU, they've certainly struggled against these bigger and nastier offensive lines when it comes to defending the run, even when they're not nasty. Like Texas A&M, 274 yards on the ground. That's not good news when you're turning around and playing Georgia. Still, though, there's one thing Brian Kelly can do, is he can turn around and utilize all this talent and put it to good use. Harold Perkins, a freshman, of course, he's had a phenomenal season. Not many people knew him coming into the year. He's one of the 5 stars that was supposed to go to A&M, ends up in Baton Rouge, and over the past couple weeks, he's really made a name for himself. 60 tackles, 11 PFL, 7.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 13 QB hurries. He's just loading up on the stat sheet. Perkins off the edge. You mix that out, B.J. Ojulari, guys like Savion Jones, Ali Gay. This is a very deep pass rush, a very deep defensive line. Makai Wingo as well. Jacqueline Roy hasn't exactly had the greatest this season, but he's still a run defender that can make things happen on the interior for LSU. This is a good front seven, I would say. A really good group of guys. Micah Baskerville, phenomenal sideline to sideline linebacker. Greg Penn stepping up well on the middle as well. And you look at a secondary that I think is also loaded with tremendous talent. A lot of transfers coming into the year. I was curious to see how they would gel. Guys like Jay Ward had moved over from his cornerback spot to his safety position. I think he's played it very well this passing attack. They got beat one-on-one a handful of times against Tennessee. Alabama, they were able to make some extended plays. They held them to a 49% completion rate, though. For the most part, this has been a very elite secondary, I would say, Nick. I don't know if it's right to say that word or not, but they've not been beat bad too many times. I don't know if that's from a lack of quality of opponent or not, but I think from the entire body of work, this group of guys like Greg Brooks, Jared Bernard Converse, Mekhi Gardner, and, of course, the aforementioned Jake Ward, they've been terrific.
Certainly this defense has impressed me so far this year. Harold Perkins coming in, supposed to go to A&M, comes to LSU, great season so far with the 7.5 sacks, plus interception as well as 2 forced fumbles. Baskerville, a leader in the linebackers, 73 total tackles from the season, leading the way for the team. Greg Penn right behind with 65 total tackles. I love this linebacking core. The Baskerville, Penn, Perkins, these guys together are incredible at the top of the stat sheet. Ojulari, having a good season as well, 5 sacks for him. Expect a little bit more out of him, but 5 sacks not a bad number. Savion Jones has 3.5 sacks so far this season as well. Ali Gay, 2 sacks, 32 total tackles for him. This is a good defense. I like the front seven a lot. They get after the quarterback, ton of pressure on the quarterback, and that's the key on Saturday. They got to make Stetson Bennett uncomfortable, put a ton of pressure on him. I like this secondary. Greg Brooks Jr., solid guy at safety, 51 total tackles for him, plus the interception, as well as the 3 pass breakups. Jay Ward, also a good leader, 48 total tackles for him, plus an interception as well. His team forces turnovers, solid defense top to bottom. I like the way they've kind of developed throughout the season. They didn't look great against Florida State in week 1, but they certainly have improved as the season gone on. This is a solid defense top to bottom.
Sage Ryan's the guy they're going to look to get involved against the run. Mekhi Wingo, he's definitely their best run defender on the interior. And then Harold Perkins, of course, off the edge. You're going to have to utilize these players, these great individual players, that is. I feel like if they can load up and stop the run, I like their chances to slow down the pass. We'll see what happens on that front. You look at a Georgia defense now that has had their fair share of struggles, I would say. You look at the Missouri game, the Kent State game, but when you look at the stat sheet, they don't give up too many yards or points. They had numerous drives, it seems like, in the Missouri and Kent State game where they're giving up big plays, and neither team hit 300 yards total. And, the highest amount they've allowed all season long is 371 against Florida in a blowout in a game where Florida did have a handful of big plays in that second half. They looked great against Tennessee. They played that passing attack. They just decided to play man coverage the whole game, and it worked. They had some great corner blitzes. The pass rush finally got cooking. That's been a kind of a struggle suit for them, I would say, is the lack of pass rush. I don't know who the top pass rusher is, Nolan Smith. He's been out for a couple of weeks now. He's still the team leader with 3 sacks, 22 on the year for this team. Juwan Dumas Johnson's right behind him there with that total from his inside linebacking position. 2.5 for Javon Bullard. I believe he had all of those in that Tennessee game. Dumas Johnson, he's a semifinalist for the Buckus. 59 tackles, 8 TFL. Again, those 3 sacks. This is a defense that's terrific from top to bottom, of course, because, they really slow down the run. It's been by committee, I think, on the interior. Jalen Carter, he's battled some health. But he's been terrific when he's been on the field here defending the run. Not having Nolan Smith's been big, but I do think guys like Nazir Stackhouse have really stepped up. Michael Williams getting involved more as a true freshman. I do like his abilities. For the most part, this front seven play with a lot of physicality. Very well-coached football team. Everybody knows that from top to bottom. Smail Mondin as well, the other linebacking spot. The 2 sophomores, I think, have filled those roles very well. Nick, obviously this front seven, they're crushing. They're going to be tough to stop, especially against a, defensive or an offensive line rather has 2 true freshmen at tackles. It's a strong suit for them on this defensive front. I think it's going to be a big mismatch up front for LSU.
I certainly agree. There's a mismatch on the front seven, 100%. When you look at this Georgia defense, you would expect to step back from last season, considering how much talent they lost to the draft. And then they lost Nolan Smith midway through the season, and you would expect to drop off in production, but they really have been solid throughout the season. Only giving up 11.3 points per game, 79.5 yards rushing per game, 191.2 yards passing per game. This defense is solid top to bottom. Dumas Johnson, one of the best linebackers in the country, 59 total tackles, 3 sacks for him, plus the 2 pass breakups and a forced fumble. I love this defense. Nazir Stackhouse, solid guy. Not even having the season that people expected with the 27 total tackles, but still great player top to bottom. Jalen Carter, 25 total tackles for him, plus the 2 sacks and the 2 forced fumbles. He can certainly stop the run, plug that hole really quickly. I love, Mondin Jr. as well, having a great season. 58 total tackles plus another pass breakup for him. This defense is good. They're going to stop the run. They're going to force you to throw the ball if you need to. They're going to make plays in the secondary. I love this defense top to bottom. They're super solid, and they're going to be able, if they're able to hold Jaden Daniels in the pocket, assuming that he's fully healthy, and force him to throw, I think they have a real chance on Saturday to put up a ton of points and stop LSU from putting 8 points on and turn this into a blowout.
Now, this secondary, I'd like to think it is a bit of a weak point for this football team, especially with their best coverage guys. Deion Jackson going down. That was numerous weeks ago. Malachi Starks, he's been terrific, but he's also had a handful of communication busts of his own right. Javon Bullard's been solid in the slot. Keely Ringo, he's been pretty inconsistent in coverage. He had a great play against Tennessee, and he's been a good tackler at times on the edge, but very inconsistent in all facets of his game. Still think this is a part of the Georgia defense that could potentially get exposed, maybe not so much in this game because I don't think Daniels is going to have a lot of time to work. This is a talented group that I certainly think if LSU all of a sudden comes out of nowhere and has great protection, I think Daniels, if he's not hobbled, could potentially start to pick this secondary apart. Of course, they proved me wrong against Tennessee. They were terrific, but I still think there's potential for them to struggle in the back end. Do you see that potentially happening in this one?
I certainly agree. Keely Ringo hasn't really lived up to the expectations that we had in the offseason. 32 total tackles for him, the 6 pass breakups. You would have expected more out of Ringo, and Starks as well. Starks having a great season leading the team in tackles, but like you said, a few busted coverages here and there, kind of gets lost on occasion in the secondary, kind of loses his man. Bullard as well, he's got lost on a few different occasions. Tyreek Smith as well, having some issues in the secondary. It's certainly possible if Jaden Daniels has time in the pocket to throw, he could pick this team apart, considering how talented the wide receivers are in their way. They're able to create space and separation from the secondary. But I just believe with the way that the defense is in the front seven for Georgia, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be terrorized all day. But if they're not able to get after him, I certainly agree that it's possible that Jaden Daniels could pick out his man in the open field and break a few plays here and there, especially if the communication's poor between Starks and Ringo on the outside. This is a secondary that's certainly probably the weakest part of this team, top to bottom. But that's still not saying much considering how strong they've been. And they only get up 191 yards per game passing. In general, this is a good defense, but the secondary does leave a little bit desired.
Looking at team comparisons at quarterback, I'm going to call it even, honestly. Both of these guys are veterans, Daniels and Bennett. Daniels, he's terrific on third down with his legs. Bennett with his arm on third down. He's been really good this year. He still makes, boneheaded plays from time to time when it comes to throwing the football, but I do think he's gotten a lot better when it comes, post or, the post-snap reads. Running back, I'm going to give the edge to Georgia. Pretty deep backfield. They got 4 guys that can get the ball for 20-plus touches if they need to. They can really dish it around to anybody. Wide receiver, LSU, they get the edge over pretty much everybody in college football. Maybe Ohio State and USC are the only competitors. These guys are just incredibly deep at wide receiver. Jenkins, Boutte, Neighbors, Jack Beach, Kyron Lacey, Brian Thomas. They're too deep. They have 6 guys that get involved. Mason Taylor's terrific as well. They dish it around tremendously. Offensive line, pretty unanimous there for Georgia. Defensive line, love the talent of LSU on their defensive front, but they've certainly not played the way Georgia has. They're once again one of the top 3 rush defenses in college football. The linebacking core for the Bulldogs has been great, but I really want to give the edge there to LSU, and I think I'll go ahead and will. I think Harold Perkins is going to go ahead and help me push it over the top there. I do like Georgia's secondary over LSU's, even though both of them have been very well, but I think the 2 games against Tennessee were vastly different. Georgia's played tremendous in the back end there, so I'm going to give them the edge in the secondary. But I think when it comes to defense more than offense, these teams are really not that far apart as a lot might lead them to say.
I agree. I think these teams are certainly a little more balanced than the public might believe. I would take Jaden Daniels as the quarterback over Stetson Bennett just because I think Daniels has a little more mobility factor and adds that kind of secondary weapon with his feet. I know Bennett has a few scores on the ground so far this season, not having a bad year on the ground, but I just think that Daniels is a little more polished of a runner and kind of creates defenses and forces defense to kind of have that second look at him and focus on his running game ability. I'd personally take Daniels in the quarterback. But otherwise, I agree with these positions. I certainly think this wide receiving core for LSU is absolutely fantastic. And the linebacking core for LSU has been solid this year, a lot better than a lot of us expected.
Looking at keys to the game, I think for LSU, you got to protect well and pass protection, and then bring the toughness against the run. For Georgia, I think the biggest key there is to just contain Jaden Daniels, and then, don't get beat in man coverage. They're going to have opportunities, and that's when they're going to want to strike, and they can certainly win those opportunities. So one-on-one coverage, got to win those matchups. I'm going to take Georgia 35-13. I think if Daniels, his health is very questionable right now. If he's 100%, I think they will certainly cover this spread. I'm going to go 35-20 if Daniels is healthy. I think this game could really be close. A lot of people, especially after losing to A&M, kind of in a laughable fashion right before this game, a lot of people are going to not be interested in this game anymore, but I certainly think there's plenty of intrigue. There's nothing on the table for LSU really. Georgia, I mean, maybe if they lose this game, they would go down 2 spots. Georgia could potentially look the rest of their starters in this one if they wanted to. I mean, even if they lost this game by 60 somehow, kind of like Wisconsin did many years ago to Ohio State, they would still probably be in the playoffs. So this kind of feels like one of the lesser attended, SEC championship games, Nick. It won't be as watched, but I certainly think there's plenty of intrigue.
LSU losing Texas A&M this weekend, it's kind of killed the buzz around this game because LSU has no viable path to the playoff with 3 losses on their record. I think the key for me for Georgia is to find a balanced attack early on offense. Throw the ball when necessary, attack the secondary, make plays if you can. We've seen the LSU secondary get beat by Tennessee. It's certainly possible that you can beat this secondary if you draw up a good playbook. And for me, for LSU, got to stop the run early, got to force Georgia in uncomfortable situations and be able to kind of spread the ball out. And also, if you're LSU on offense, you need to find a way to make sure that Daniels is healthy and kind of get him involved in the game as early as possible, get the Georgia defense second-guessing him and kind of trying to figure out where he's going to end up.
Couldn't have said it better. That's me for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Nick, as always, appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
See you guys next time.